friends, have you ever run into someone that you know, but you just can't quite remember their name? And then sometimes maybe you forget where you placed your keys. Is that really normal forgetfulness or an early sign of something more serious, like dementia? How would you like to improve your memory and potentially reverse over a decade of premature brain aging? In this video, I'm going to show you 10 different vitamins and supplements that have the strongest science-backed brain protection data. Really, dementia protection is what we should aim for, and cognitive resilience. So let's start with B vitamins. There are essentially 8 different B vitamins that allow the human population to explode from less than 2 billion people to over 8 billion people in the last 100 years. Can you believe that? What people don't realize is that these vitamins, they not only help your body grow, they help your body detoxify. They reduce inflammation, especially by an amino acid called homocysteine. And you make it yourself. So not all amino acids are actually good for your body. Higher homocysteine levels are strongly associated with Alzheimer's dementia, vascular dementia, and stroke-related cognitive decline because it damages protein, it damages DNA, it damages melanin, and the fat that covers your nerves and your brain cells. But your beautifully designed body has a way to help you detoxify all of that. If you get enough of vitamin B12, enough vitamin B9, which is folate, and enough vitamin B6, which is pyridoxine. Now, there's no perfect diet. Vegans and vegetarians are devoid of animal products where the vitamin B12 is at, so that they have to supplement. However, anyone over 50 will start having lower vitamin B12 levels, even if you're a carnivore, because your stomach needs to extract that B12 from your foods. And as you age, you just simply make less stomach acid. And what about those on antacids? So anyone, regardless of what they eat, if you're over 50, it's really recommended that you take a vitamin B12 supplement. And if you have a restrictive diet or absorption issues, then definitely vitamin B12 is a vitamin to highly consider supplementing daily. Vitamin B12 is also essential for methylation, which I'll talk about a little later. But B12 isn't the only vitamin important in homocysteine regulation to keep inflammation down. You also need another vitamin called folate. You've probably have heard of that when in terms of pregnancy. Now, the thing is, there are 2 forms of vitamin B9 folate, which should be found in natural leafy green vegetables and lentils and fruits if you eat them. But then there's folic acid, which was developed in 1943 to fortify flours and cereals and now used in supplements. The thing is, folic acid is not biologically active. And to become biologically active, you need enzymes to convert it. You need to methylate that folic acid to methylfolate, which is the active form of folate that your body needs to use. And if you don't have enough of the right enzymes, like people with a reduced MTHFR enzyme activity, then you'll likely have a folic acid buildup in the blood, which then may compete with other natural folates that you are eating from your food. And then when you get excess, you may also mask a vitamin B12 deficiency. And there's even some speculation that it may increase the risk of cancer because folic acid can be used by existing cancer cells. Now, what has been underappreciated for decades is that cancer is a result of a weakened immune system, just like dementia. And that's why now many therapies are trying to figure out how to stimulate the immune system to take out cancer cells. And studies have also shown that the immune system can maybe revolutionize dementia-related diseases like Huntington's.
The virus gets into the neurons and injects a piece of DNA, and it basically reprograms.
But unmetabolized folic acid can actually reduce the natural activity of natural killer cells, which are super important immune cells that help to detect early cancer cells. And like everything else in life, there needs to be a balance between too much of a good thing, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're better off. Or if you're totally on empty, it doesn't mean you're better off either. But at the same time, folate is an essential vitamin. So I personally prefer to bypass this whole folic acid story because it's still up in the air. And when I supplement, I basically would take the methylfolate form. However, I don't like to supplement with methylfolate. I prefer to get my folate from whole natural foods because it's abundant in legumes and leafy greens. And that's the bulk of my diet. So if you're a low-carb carnivore or a standard American diet and you're not including legumes and leafy greens, then you're probably going to be deficient in natural folate, deficient for your body's needs. So the next vitamin is vitamin B6, which is not just important to help you to be able to convert and detoxify homocysteine into cysteine, but cysteine is super important to glutathione, which is your body's master antioxidant. So essentially, this vitamin turns trash into treasure, but by itself, it can propagate health too. But there's a second part of why vitamin B6 is crucial. It literally converts essential amino acids into neurotransmitters, or the communication molecules that allow your brain and your nervous system to talk to one another. And without vitamin B6, you can't convert tryptophan into serotonin, which is important not only for your sleep, but your appetite regulation and for you to be in a good mood. So if you're having problems motivating yourself, focusing, or just dealing with the stressors in everyday life, maybe you have an imbalance of converting tyrosine into dopamine and norepinephrine. And if you're struggling with staying awake and learning, could it be that you have imbalance of histidine being converted into histamine? And lastly, if you're struggling with anxiety, could it be that you're having an imbalance of glutamate being converted into GABA? So without vitamin B6, people will be depressed, they'll be more irritable, anxious, they'll suffer from insomnia, and have brain fog. Sounds like these are a lot of symptoms compatible with dementia. And on top of that, remember, high homocysteine levels, it actually damages blood vessels. You got blood vessels all over your body, including your brain, that feeds and nourishes neurons. And this leads to an elevated risk of stroke, which elevates your risk of dementia. But before you get there, you may have tingling in your hands and feet, which is called peripheral neuropathy. That's nerve damage. And if your nerves on your feet are damaged, you can bet that there's damage going on in your brain. Now, and of course, when you damage your brain, you can reduce your memory. And if the damage is in your frontal lobe, you're reducing the executive function, your cognitive skills. And that also can significantly impact your mood. So let's talk about how we can get some of these vitamins in your foods. Number one, B12 is not naturally made in plants or animals. And the only reason why animals have B12 is because they're full of bacteria. In fact, that bacteria is how B12 gets into animals. But the wrong bacteria can give you food poisoning, right? So when you eat animal products, whether it's eggs or dairy or meat, you will get B12. But if you don't eat animals, then drinking some fortified plant milks, eating nutritional yeast, that can get you a little bit of B12, but you probably just should take a B12 supplement. Now for folate, I had mentioned legumes and leafy greens, right? Legumes are like lentils and beans, like red beans, navy beans, kidney beans. Leafy greens are like spinach, asparagus, collard greens, kale. They are all great sources of folate. The greener, the better. And you should target at least 3 cups a day of both of these foods. Now, when you eat plants, you're going to get more than one nutrient, right? So when you eat legumes, you're going to get more than just one B vitamin. You're going to get some vitamin B6 too. And when you eat potatoes and sweet potatoes, there's also vitamin B6. How about bananas, avocados, and sunflower seeds? They are also rich in vitamin B6. And yeah, sure, you can get these vitamins fortified in cereals, but do you really think that's the best way to get your vitamins? Now, let's turn our attention to another vitamin that's super critical for your body, vitamin D. Vitamin D is for dementia, anti-dementia that is. So if you have low vitamin D, you increase your risk of having Alzheimer's dementia. Now, if you were living around the 17th to 19th century, you would probably have suffered from some form of rickets way before dementia. Rickets is a disease of soft bones, bow-legged disease, because people just massively polluted the earth and blocked sunlight. You can't, get any vitamin D if you don't have sunshine. And vitamin D is not just for straight bones. We don't need a giant meteor to destroy the earth. We're doing a great job of that ourselves with all the pollution we make. So every time people think we're advancing life, we really aren't. And then science has to come up with the solutions to clean up what industry pollutes, right? So in the 19th century, a scientist discovered that cod liver oil was the solution curing rickets, a disease literally created by man. Now think about it. The sun has been out since before the earth was created, and yet millions of people suffered from rickets for centuries after the Industrial Revolution. And how is this a natural disease? It's not. It's man-made. So instead of addressing it from the root cause, to stop the air pollution, what do? We deployed scientists to try to figure out solutions so that we continue to pollute the earth. And we had to invest a boatload of money to really take care of this. And if we didn't actually figure out that vitamin D was it, we would still all be taking cod liver oil. And if you've ever tried that, that's pretty nasty. Now today, if it wasn't for people with the foresight to reduce air pollution, we would be stuck in the same reality. It's really ultimately motivation. What will motivate businesses to think for the rest of society society instead of their own pockets? What'll motivate you to help not just yourself, but your community to survive, right? That's the biggest question. How can we thrive together as opposed to doing this piecemeal and just thinking about ourselves? It's really, we want to all be able to motivate our entire community, right, to get healthy. And when you look in your nutrition, you begin to realize that a lot of these diseases that people are suffering from become chronic, and their root cause is nutritional deficiencies created by industry. Now, air pollution still exists. I'm living in a very polluted city, Southern California. It kills 7 million people around the world, and some cities are more polluted than others. And at the end of the day, I know everybody's got to go, but it's a decade of suffering before you go. That's really painful. That's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to not to lose my health, right? And we would still be talking about cod liver oil today if it wasn't for the discovery of vitamin D in the 20th century. Rickets was so visible to people that people really cemented vitamin D caused rickets. That was the only thing vitamin D was good for, and that was a mistake. And for years, since I lived in sunny Southern California, I learned that my body can make vitamin D. I believed that I didn't need a vitamin D supplement. And the truth is far from that. The truth is we build our cages, right? We build these rooftops to block sunlight in our lives. And you need vitamin D throughout your life to have a healthy brain. So however, unlike folate where you can't make it, because our skin can make it, we think it's not essential, but it's absolutely essential. But just because your skin makes vitamin D, it's not necessarily the active form. Doesn't mean it's usable. You actually need another cofactor, magnesium, to make it usable. So if you're not getting enough magnesium, you can't convert vitamin D to its bioactive form. And it turns out that vitamin D receptors are not just in your brain and your bone, but they're in every single cell in your body. They're even in the nucleus where they interact with your DNA. So you can imagine if you don't get enough vitamin D, there will be serious, dire consequences in unimaginable ways that affect your immune system and your nervous system. And you can try to get it through food, fortified milks, fatty fish, mushrooms, but it's really hard to do that. It's usually not enough. Your skin color, if you're dark skinned, if you have a lot of fat underneath your skin, that all reduces the amount of vitamin D you can make. And we are transforming into an obese nation, whether you admit it or not. Being older also reduces your levels of bioactive vitamin D. And not to mention all the sunblock that we've spent the last couple decades promoting and wearing some protective clothing. In this day and age, there is no reason to guess your vitamin D level. Get a vitamin D level measured and you will know exactly if you're doing enough to get an adequate vitamin D level. Let's go down the alphabet. The next vitamin is vitamin E. Now, just like vitamin D, vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. Your brain is 60% fat in dry weight. So getting an adequate amount of vitamin E is essential for your brain health, but it's not taking vitamin E supplements. It's eating whole foods loaded with vitamin E, like seeds, nuts, avocado. Vitamin E is not just one kind of vitamin. It's actually a family of 8 fat-soluble vitamins called tocopherols and tocotrienols. And there are alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocopherols and tocotrienols. But the most biologically active form is alpha tocopherol. And this is the one that is actually measured in your blood. So this family of vitamin E compounds, they actually regulate your gene expression. They protect your nervous system, especially your brain, because they are antioxidants and they neutralize free radicals that are constantly being made in your brain cells. And that damages your brain cells. So when your cells get oxidized, you lose brain cells. Now, people with fat malabsorption problems, like people with cholestatic liver disease, gallbladder issues or cystic fibrosis, they have a problem getting enough vitamin E. And when you damage your nervous system, you also affect how you feel, how you walk. Some people can get neuropathy, right? Tingling feeling. They can have ataxia. And in order for your muscles to move, you need nervous system input. And that's why people who have spinal cord injuries are unable to move their muscles and they become paraplegic or quadriplegic. But we have a nation of people deconditioning. So when your nervous system is damaged, you also get muscle weakness, muscle atrophy. You don't necessarily have to get a spinal cord injury to have that atrophy. And a lot of people are turning to vitamin E supplements. Well, you even want to check your dose because high levels of vitamin E may increase your risk of heart failure, may increase your risk of prostate cancer. And super high doses can increase your risk of all-cause mortality. I would personally stick to whole foods like almonds, hazelnuts, pumpkin seeds, and peanuts.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Number 6 is vitamin K, which supports sphingolipid metabolism, critical for neuronal membranes. Vitamin K is concentrated in the fat matter of your brain, the white part of your brain, because vitamin K is important for certain proteins in the brain that support the fat repair. And your brain is essentially electrical wires insulated with a lot of fat. Your brain is so powerful that when the wires short circuit, people can have a seizure. So if you've ever hired an electrician, you know that the live wires are all surrounded by plastic material that does not conduct electricity. And in your brain, the fat is that material to make sure that the wires don't cross and that your brain doesn't short circuit. But the problem with the fat is that it gets rancid, right? When you heat it up and expose it to oxygen. But as a byproduct of just normal life, you moving and thinking, so much heat and oxygen is generated to make your own fat to go rancid. That is literally happening all day long. That's called oxidation. And luckily for you, you're beautifully designed to counteract that stress if you have enough vitamin K, because vitamin K activates vitamin K dependent proteins like Gas6 and protein S. People with low vitamin K numbers, they suffer from brain injury and they literally lose brain cells because that myelin is damaged, the white matter, the fatty part. Hence, it's so critical for you to seek out vitamin K rich foods, especially from green leafy vegetables because they are abundant in vitamin K. And people who eat enough green leafy vegetables throughout the day, they actually have better verbal memory and better processing speed. We have a nation obsessed with calcium supplementation, right? We are fortifying everything with calcium, thinking that it makes a difference in our bone health. But what it's doing is it's depositing calcium rocks, pellets, pebbles in your brain that ultimately blocks blood flow. It creates dams, and that contributes to neurodegeneration. And guess what? Vitamin K actually helps to regulate that calcium to prevent it from depositing in arteries and potentially in brain tissue. So how do you get your vitamin K? You got to eat more spinach, kale, collard greens, broccoli, romaine lettuce. There's a plethora of options if you go to an Asian supermarket. The more you eat, the smarter your brain gets. And I want to go back and touch upon another B vitamin, which is actually the very first vitamin discovered amongst all essential micronutrients. And that is vitamin B1, thiamine, number 7. And really, this vitamin should have been number 1 on this list because it is the first vitamin that goes empty when you are stressed, when you go on a fasting diet, when you go on a restrictive diet, and when you basically elevate your metabolism, whether you're exercising more or you're sick. Vitamin B1 can't be stored. It is super important for energy metabolism. And for sure, if you're missing vitamin B1, it will lead you to irreversible dementia called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Now, however, even if you're mildly depleted, it impairs how your brain uses glucose, right? We have a crisis of how people use up glucose in dementia. And maybe it's just vitamin B1. Now, again, man was responsible for this. In the late 19th to 20th century, hundreds and thousands of people in Asia, they died, especially where their diet was heavily based on polished white rice. It replaced whole grain rice. And the exact numbers are hard to calculate, but historical estimates suggest that in Japan alone, tens of thousands of Navy sailors from Japan, they died of beriberi. Dutch East Indies in Indonesia in the early 1900s, thousands of colonial troops and prisoners died annually. In China and Southwest Asia, widespread civilian death, often in epidemics. And globally, millions likely died between the late 1800s and early 1900s before it was discovered that vitamin B1 was what they were missing. Now, and if you know anything about military history, you know that the military plays a pivotal role in public health. And when you affect the military's function, when you affect their soldiers, that's when all countries, they go all out to find solutions for their military. So beriberi, or vitamin B1 deficiency, actually took out the Japanese Navy during World War II. And a Navy doctor, they noticed that people who are getting sick, they only ate white rice. So he advocated that people eat a variety of different foods adding barley and meat and vegetables. But those people who still didn't eat a variety, they got very. But like our modern day and age, nobody listens to real doctors. So the Japanese army, they didn't change, and they continue to have people literally pass away from this simple vitamin deficiency. And like most other nutritional discoveries, it took the act of another species so that humans can test and prove to themselves that it was a vitamin deficiency. We tend to make our own mistakes, but we don't learn from them. So scientists, what they literally did was they fed chickens polished rice. And those chickens developed paralysis, just like beriberi caused paralysis in humans. And then what do? They gave the trash back, the husk of the rice. And guess what? Those chickens got cured. Eventually, vitamin B1 was purified from the bran of the rice. And so what did people do with this critical information? Instead of getting people to eat whole grain rice, brown rice, purple rice, red rice, they just basically started fortifying rice with essential vitamins. They took starch, very nutrient deficient, and they just added synthetic vitamins in it. And that gave the world the okay to eat a nutrient deficient food like white rice. And this is why rice noodles, rice sheets, mochi, it just propagated. People are enjoying them in pounds and pounds a year. And this is the part of the problem why we have an obesity epidemic, because we combine nutrient deficient foods high in calories, low in nutrients, that have no fiber, and we expect that to propel our health. That's not how nature designed us to eat our food. And the more we invent ultra-processed creations, the sicker people just become. So if you want to get natural vitamin, eat whole grains, legumes, whole nuts, whole seeds. Right? Number 8 is another epidemic vitamin catastrophe made by man. And that's pellagra, vitamin B3 or niacin deficiency. Pellagra, notorious for causing dementia, and it took the lives of millions of people in less than 50 years around the globe. And in fact, there were dedicated pellagra hospitals. They were asylums because people went crazy and they thought it was an infectious disease or something. It was that bad. And like our modern day and age, we keep blaming infections for nutritional deficiencies. Now, how did pellagra happen? Well, people ate restrictive diets. And again, if you eat restrictive diets, you're not going to get the plethora of vitamins and minerals that we all need to survive. Without niacin, you can't make energy molecules called NAD+ and NADPH. They are essential for life. These molecules support energy metabolism to make ATP, DNA, metabolism for DNA repair, as well as antioxidant defense. So if you don't eat the right foods, and if you have malabsorption issues or excessively indulge in alcohol, you get niacin deficient, which elevates your risk of getting dementia. But you don't have to be absolutely deficient to have dementia. You can just be suboptimal, and it can affect the rate at which your brain processes, right? And increase the rate at which your brain ages. So there's a lot of research now focusing on boosting NAD through other mechanisms, including NMN, nicotinamide, and NR. And people think that they can help to slow aging by taking these supplements. Well, I'm not so sure, because every nutrient, when you have an unregulated excess, you can have also detrimental consequences. So if you want to bypass the rate limiting step of making NAD, well, just know that you may be affecting some cancer cells because they need it too. So theoretically, you can have an unchecked amount of cancer-promoting NMN, which is probably not what people want to do, right? So if you want to get a natural amount of niacin, go for peanuts, legumes, mushrooms, green peas. And of course, if you already eat meat, most of that has a ton of niacin. Now, number 9 is vitamin C. And it's fascinating to me that the only time people think about vitamin C is when they get sick. Do you know which organ uses the most amount of vitamin C? Your brain. It gets first dibs. And again, we have millions of people who died of vitamin C deficiency because of a restrictive diet. Heard of scurvy? Scurvy is the absolute deficient, like zero amount of vitamin C that the body has. And it just literally will fall apart. Your brain will fall apart. You'll start having mood changes, get irritable, and then you can spontaneously bleed, right? And for a century, people built themselves boats to sail around the world, and they got themselves so sick because they didn't bring the right kinds of foods. What did they bring? They ate dairy, they ate dry meat, and then they ate biscuits. Pretty much a kind of like what people eat today. They're called sandwiches with a glass of milk. That's not complete nutrition, folks. You're missing a ton of vitamins, including vitamin C, that not only prevents dementia, but it gives your body the ability to stay young and vibrant, to have healthy blood vessels and healthy skin so that you're not black and blue from bruising. But this video is all about the brain. And the brain has very high concentrations of vitamin C because it needs it to survive, to detoxify. It's really only second to the adrenal gland in vitamin C. And when you have vitamin C, it's like a shield to protect your brain from the oxidative stress that your own brain makes. And remember how your brain is full of fat and how it gets rancid with heat and oxygen. Well, again, you generate a ton of heat every time you think, every time you move, every time your brain is working. And on top of that, you also need vitamin C to make neurotransmitters to convert dopamine into epinephrine. And since the brain requires a boatload of blood flow all the time, those train tracks need to be kept healthy. They are made out of collagen. They require vitamin C to keep it healthy and sturdy. Otherwise, you pop, and that's a stroke, right? Spontaneous bleeding. So collagen is not just important for your skin, for you to look younger. It's important for your entire body to hold all your connective tissue that holds your body together, including your blood vessels. And people with higher levels of vitamin C, they just have better memory. They can pay more attention when people are talking, like this video, and they think faster. So if you don't feel like you're performing at your optimum, you're tired, you have brain fog, you have poor mood, you have poor memory, you have maybe a little bit of depression or anxiety, confused, well, maybe you're not eating enough vitamin C rich foods, right? And how many times a day does this happen to people? And what do they turn to? Caffeinated drinks, coffee or energy drinks, right? That's what people are drinking. And then they drink a bunch of sugar. All of that is vitamin deficient. It lacks not only vitamin C, but vitamin B1. And all you're doing is stimulating your body unnaturally, depleting more of your core vitamins that you need. And you're not getting healthier by doing that. So what has vitamin C? It's not just citrus fruits, it's bell pepper, it's berries, it's leafy greens, it's kiwi. They are all loaded with vitamin C. And if you're into superfoods, check out the camu berry, which has one of the highest concentrations of vitamin C. Number 10 are carotenoids or vitamin A, otherwise known as retinoids, retinol, retinoic acid. These compounds are critical for gene expression, for neural development, for our synaptic plasticity, for your brain to grow and learn. Retinoic acid signaling influences neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and dopamine, and it is involved in memory consolidation. They also have a strong antioxidant effect. So when you eat brightly colored fresh fruits and vegetables, they contain carotenoids like beta-carotene, a vitamin A precursor that helps neutralize these free radicals, which again causes you to age, right? Causes dementia. People with lower vitamin A or beta-carotene levels in their blood, it's linked to higher risk of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. And the more you eat foods rich in carotenoids, like fruits and vegetables, it correlates with better cognitive performance in people who are aging. However, taking vitamin A supplement or derivative medications probably doesn't work. There are lots of foods with vitamin A. If you take a supplement, you can get toxic. And if you want to know specifically which foods, watch the next video.